Hey there friends and enemies, Joper here again, and today I wanted to talk about the Ballidorse Wrathweavers, the brand new exotic for the Stasis Warlock, and how it compares or stacks up to the Osmiomancy gloves, which have been dominant for quite some time with the Stasis subclass. So if you didn't know, the Ballidorse Wrathweavers has the perk Hearts of Ice. Your Winter's Wrath Shockwave deals increased shatter damage. Allies in range of your Shockwave gain an overshield and increased damage with stasis weapons. So the way this is going to shine is in a couple ways. First of all, it's going to be really effective against unstoppable champions, because with the Lightfall update, you can stun unstoppable champions by shattering them, and obviously your super shatters them on your second burst, which is nice, and so that's going to do increased damage to them. And there's one place this exotic is going to be much more effective. Then you have allies in range gain an overshield, which is very nice in something like a Grandmaster, and increased damage with stasis weapons. So if your allies are running, say you have a raid you're running, or if you're running a Grandmaster Nightfall and they are using stasis weapons, this would come in very, very handy. Now, in solo play, when you're playing with randoms, this might not be as effective because you don't ever know what stasis weapons they're going to be run, so that part of the perk is definitely going to be situational more than anything. So keep that in mind going forward. So how am I going to build around this exotic? Essentially, I want to get my super back as quickly as possible, and I want to be freezing enemies as often as I can, because that's where stasis shines. So what am I running? I have on the Shadebinder, obviously, with your normal stasis melee, the Penumbra Blast, and the Cold Snap Grenade. This is because I want to really focus on freezing enemies, and this will allow me to freeze enemies, and then the freeze will chain because of the aspect Ice Flare Bolts. Shattering a frozen target spawns Seekers that track and freeze other targets. Then we've also got Glacier Harvest. Freezing targets create stasis shards around the frozen targets. Higher tier combatants create more shards. This is nice to always generate those shards and get healing and all that kind of good stuff that you get from those shards. So you got Whisper of Conduction. Nearby stasis shards track to your position, which is nice. Whisper of Bonds, defeating frozen targets, grants you super energy. Again, I really want my super back as often as possible. Whisper of Rhyme, collecting stasis shard, grants a small amount of overshield, which falls off after 10 seconds. Collecting additional shards adds to the overshield and refreshes the timer. So essentially, I'll have a buffed up overshield pretty much all the time with this build, which is very, very nice. And then Whisper of Fissures increases the damage and size of the burst of stasis when you destroy a stasis crystal or defeat a frozen target. The second part is the best part of this build, because you're going to want to have a big burst as you're defeating those frozen targets, and you're essentially chaining frozen targets. This is phenomenal for crowd control. It's not quite as good as the Osmiomancy in my personal opinion, especially in a more passive playstyle. If you just want to sit back and shoot things, the Osmiomancy with the double cold snaps for the double of the essentially the turrets that you can run with that other aspect, the Bleak Watcher, is going to be way better for controlling targets. However, this is still very effective, especially if you combine it with some stasis weapons like the Riptide with Chill Clip. I really enjoy that weapon. I think it's very, very good, especially against champions. And then we've also got the Winter Bite. Although you can run anything in this combination as long as it is stasis, because it's really going to take advantage of the stasis interactions. You can run any heavy with Chill Clip. You can run primary weapon with Headstone. All of those will be very effective. Essentially, you just want to make sure you're freezing targets as often as possible. That's why I went with this combination, because I am essentially freezing as many things as possible and making up for the lesser crowd control that I would have seen compared to the Osmiomancy gloves. Now, as far as my mods are on my armor goes, I'm going to run Heavy Ammo Finder, Void Siphon, and Stasis Siphon. Void Siphon, especially because I'm running a Hero's Burden with a Repulsor Brace. This is going to give me an overshield as well pretty often, because I do have the artifact perk Volatile Flow, Next season, I might run destabilizing rounds instead of this, but I do like repulsor brace just because I want to make sure that I have an overshield as often as possible. If my stasis overshield goes down for any reason, and with volatile rounds, this thing is really, really good. You could run a different Void submachine gun or AR here if you would like to. This is just what I was using, and I think it's better than destabilizing rounds this season, although that'll change next season. Then we've also got things like momentum transfer, impact induction, and void loader. Then we've got stasis reserves, concussive dampening, and unflinching void aim. I don't need unflinching stasis aim because I'm using a glaive and a fusion rifle. Stasis Scavenger and Holster, as well as Stasis Weapon Surge. This is if you don't have something with auto-loading holster. You're going to want to have your weapons reloading as often as possible when you put them away, when you holster them, so you don't have to worry about that. And then finally, we've got the Time Dilation, Distribution, and Reaper. Essentially, I want to generate as many orbs as possible. I want to freeze as many enemies as possible, and I want to buff my stasis weapons because I am running the double stasis. Like I said, I've tried this out with a primary with headstone as well as a rocket with chill clip, and that's also very effective as well. And so you can really mix and match with this build, which is one of the things I like to do personally as far as the combinations. You just want to make sure that you're freezing things as often as possible. You could run even something like Aegir Scepter, except for the fact that you're not really going to see the benefit from Aegir Scepter's like charged up ability, because you want to be using your super with this build. And so that's why if you're running Aegirs with your Osmiomancy, it's going to be more effective than if you run it with your Ballidorse Wrathweavers. So gameplay loop is pretty simple. Just freeze everything, essentially. Like, there were times when I wasn't getting all of my abilities back, but for the most part I had them pretty consistently, especially as I could just pop them and generate a little bit of ability energy for my other, in tandem, my other abilities that I have on cooldown. So that was very nice. And then if I didn't have my abilities, I could just freeze everything with my Riptide or my Winter Bite. So it's a pretty fun gameplay loop. It's really effective across all types of different content, which is nice. I love using this in just casual gameplay. Like, this is from the seasonal battlegrounds, but you could also use this in Nightfalls as well, and it'll still slap. You might have to adjust like your other weapon or like your energy weapon, apologies, but other than that, yeah, it's still very, very good. I would highly recommend checking out. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel. It helps me out tremendously. Shows you want to see more Destiny 2 content from me going forward. I've been really enjoying this season since Lightfall dropped, and I am excited for the update next week where we're going to have a lot more builds be viable because of the buffs to a bunch of different weapons, so stay tuned for all that. My name is JoPa. I hope you have a good one, and I'll catch you all later.